Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? Apple's killing off the headphone jack and the world is freaking out. But is it really as big of a deal as it seems? So for a little bit of context, I'm filming this the day after Apple officially announced the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. Now, everyone knows the big headline from that presentation, whether Apple wanted it to be a big deal or not, is that they're removing the analog headphone jack from those new phones. This isn't really a surprise. We've known about this for actually a few months because there have been lots of rumors and speculation circulating about it. Now, to touch on the way that Apple rumors seem to work is, I think Apple intentionally lets some of that information leak. And I think they normally do that for the purposes of trying to build hype for that upcoming product. That said, I think this time around, they let that information leak especially early because we've known about the lack of the headphone jack for several months prior to when the phone came out. It's not like a revelation that we only learned about 3 days before or anything. I think Apple actually let that information leak especially early for two reasons. One, to judge the overall response that people would have to a major change like that. And two, to kind of soften the blow during the presentation and unveiling of the product itself. Which kind of makes a lot of sense because you wouldn't want to have, all these journalists go into a big presentation product, reveal like that and have this bombshell get dropped that, oh, by the way, this connector that's been a mainstay of products for a very long time on a lot of products, we're just going to kill it. I don't think that would have gone over very well. So they announced it. Pretty much everybody knew that it was coming anyway, to the point where we've actually seen some other manufacturers of phones, a lot of these Android phone makers, also start to pull headphone jacks from their phones. We've known about it that long, so it's no surprise to anybody. But everyone is still freaking out about it, and they're freaking out about it for several reasons. One of the reasons, probably the most common reason that I've heard, is that it's going to be more inconvenient, right? A lot of people use analog headphones on their iPhone all the time. And not just they want to be able to use analog headphones on their phone, but they want to be able to charge the phone at the same time. With the 7 and 7 Plus, you lose the ability to listen to audio and charge the phone at the same time, just using the phone, right? With the 6S and older, you've got a lightning port for charging and you've got that analog jack. And that's a feature that I myself am getting impacted by because I actually use that quite a bit. Whenever I go on a longer drive or road trip or whatever, I like to listen to streaming radio. And I don't care how good the battery in the phone is, it's not going to last long enough for me to be actively streaming radio from my phone while on the go. So I plug the phone into the car for power, and then I plug it into the aux input in my car stereo. And that works great. Now, going forward, I'm not going to have that option, at least not directly. The other things that people are freaking out about is it'll cause them to have to buy a new thing, namely new headphones. I can see it both ways with this one. It's frustrating, yes, to have a favorite pair of headphones that you like, and suddenly they're obsolete. You have to go out and buy a new thing just to keep using the headphones that you got, at least without wanting to use some sort of adapter or cable solution. There's also the added cost of doing so. It's not just the inconvenience. It's not just the frustration of, look, I had this thing that used to work and now you're saying it's no longer good enough. Yesterday it was perfectly fine and you supported it, and now you're saying it's this antiquated thing that we need to kill off and get rid of and move past. And it's also the cost of doing so. You're already asking for a premium price on the phone itself, and then you're saying I have to go out and buy $60+ or more for a pair of headphones just to listen on the thing, at least without, losing other functionality. I can see that frustration. Then there's the third reason, or the third impact that it's going to have, and Apple's already kind of addressed this, but it is a legitimate concern in that by going away from analog audio, Apple is pushing everyone into a digital-only solution, meaning the only options for getting audio out of a phone, out of the new iPhone, is either through Bluetooth or the Lightning port, both of which are digital options. Since they're digital options, there exists the possibility that they could enforce DRM over those connections. DRM is more than just what you can do with the files that you download. Like if you go buy music from an online music store, DRM impacts more than just like being able to copy that file from one place to another. DRM also can control what devices you can play that media on. So rightfully so, I think a lot of people are worried that by going to a digital-only system where you're only able to do digital from the playback source directly into your ears, leaving analog to the very last stage, that eventually it could be ripe for implementing DRM, and that you'll soon be able to only play music that you buy or stream on approved devices. Could you imagine that? Like you buy a pair of headphones, but they didn't pay some arbitrary licensing fee to the recording industry, and so they get blacklisted and you can't play music on them. Now, that's kind of an extreme example. And Apple has already come out and said, I think it was Phil Schiller who said it, one of their VPs, who said, that's just crazy talk, right? We're not going to do that. And I believe him. I believe him when he said that they're not going to implement something like that, especially since they've gone away from DRM with the music you buy from the iTunes store. But it is a little bit of a slippery slope. The one thing I'm afraid I don't quite believe Schiller on is something that he said during the presentation for the iPhone 7, when he was basically trying to explain / justify removing the headphone jack. He said, in addition to all these technical reasons why we're doing it, all of which are technically true, but I don't necessarily buy. He said the other reason why Apple's doing it is for quote unquote courage. Well, that leads me to kind of a philosophical question about the nature of the term courage. Is it really courage if you're doing it for how do I phrase it? Is it really courage if you're doing it for reasons only for yourself? Is it courage if you're not trying to help somebody else in the process? Because you know what? I don't really see this move as being all that pro-consumer. The analog headphone jack has been an industry standard for an incredibly long time, as Apple indicated. But does that mean that it's bad, right? This 50-year-old standard, does that mean that it's bad? I don't think so. It works fine. It's capable of high-res audio. It's capable of future expansion. The only thing is it's analog. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the nature of analog stuff, especially when you look at, what exactly it's doing. It's just delivering audio. And it's really just a literal connection between the DAC chip in the phone and the headphone amp circuit and just the drivers. It's not like there's a whole lot that can really get improved in terms of headphone or audio performance by moving that part of the connection from analog to digital. And in the process of killing off that connection, you have suddenly made everyone's existing investments not necessarily obsolete, but a lot more difficult to use. You've signaled to them that, you know what, I don't care if you just bought a $300 pair of headphones yesterday, at some point, sooner rather than later, they're going to be obsolete and you won't be able to use them easily, if at all. And that's really, really frustrating. For some technologies, I understand that. Apple has done this before where they've killed off technologies that people at the time said were perfectly usable, they were perfectly good. Why did you do that? The big example is going to be the floppy drive on the original iMac. Apple killed off the floppy drive with that original iMac. People flipped out, but people got over it. There's a difference, though, between killing off the floppy drive and killing off the analog headphone jack. And it's that the floppy drive really was limited in what it could do. It really was. It could only go so fast. It could only store so much, right? Data capacity had been increasing. The size of files had been increasing. There could be options for better reliability. Floppy disks weren't all that reliable. They weren't all that fast. So there were options to make, other media faster. So I could see in the long term, killing off the floppy drive as being a good decision. And I think most people will come to that same agreement, with hindsight being 2020. The headphone jack, though, I'm having a real tough time justifying, even if I try to think 10 or 15 years out from now, saying, in 10 or 15 years, we are going to be in a much better place than we are now. Because it's not just everything that I bought today is going to be, obsolete in a couple of years. Because let's face it, the headphone jack is done on Apple products. Not just the phones, done on all Apple products going forward. They're not going to release new Macs. They're not going to release new iPads that have headphone jacks on them. They're just not. They have to be consistent like that. Either that or sales of the new phone will actually be impacted by that decision. And they'll end up reverting with the next version of the phone, whatever they're going to call that, the iPhone 8 or whatever's going to come out in 2017. I don't see that happening, though. I see Apple going ahead full steam with this decision and not backing down to it. But even in 10, 15 years, are we really going to be in that much better of a place? I mean, we'll have gotten over it. We'll be over it in a year from now, right? There'll still be some people complaining. I'll still be complaining about it. I'll have to carry around adapters and all this crap to make the headphones that I have continue to work because there's nothing wrong with them. And in fact, I rather like a lot of the headphones that I have. But in 10 or 15 years, will we really be in a better place? I don't know. I don't see the nature of audio being that ripe for disruption. I mean, you're just making sound waves go into your ear holes. We're already at a place where music sounds really, really good. The technology we have, whether that technology is analog or digital, music sounds fantastic. And we're really kind of bumping up against the upper limits of humans' hearing capability, right? I mean, you can go from standard CD quality audio to the high-res audio, which is better sampling rate, better bit depth and all that, but a lot of people won't be able to tell the difference. I mean, especially when you consider that a lot of people can't even tell the difference between a medium bitrate MP3 and a regular full quality CD. So what's the point in trying to push that any further? All you're really gaining is just the convenience of no wires, which has inconvenience in and of itself in that the headphones themselves are generally going to be a bit more expensive than analog versions with a cord. It's another thing you have to worry about keeping charged, right? So there's an energy efficiency kind of angle to it. You've got to keep that charged. They're going to take more power to charge. It's another thing, you have to carry around. You got to make sure that you have a cable that can charge your headphones when you're on the go or whatever. If the battery in the headphones dies, well, you're just screwed. Sorry, no more listening to music for you. Analog headphones, you just plug them in, it works. They always work. They don't need power to operate. And then you've also got worries about RF interference. Bluetooth is pretty robust, but the white space that we get, at least in the United States for RF, is constantly shrinking. The FCC keeps taking a lot of chunks of RF away and selling them to cell phone companies, and I've kind of talked about this in the past. But, Bluetooth isn't 100% reliable, so you're sometimes going to be getting a less reliable connection, a worse experience. Furthermore, Bluetooth, if you're going to be looking at that angle of it, going wireless, is not a lossless audio, protocol. They have to compress the audio when sending it over Bluetooth. So even if they try to tout, well, it's going to sound better without the analog headphone jack, that's kind of BS. Because with the analog audio, you're only limited by the quality of the file on your device. If you've got a lossless audio file on your iPhone, you're really then only limited by the capabilities of the digital to analog converter in the phone hardware itself. But if they've got to compress the audio to send it over a wireless connection, well, that kind of negates the point of having lossless audio on your phone. Well, what about Lightning headphones? Oh, great. So now I've got a proprietary solution, right? Lightning isn't an industry standard. Lightning is proprietary to Apple. And furthermore, Apple doesn't have Lightning on any other products other than iPhones and iPads. They don't have Lightning ports on their Macs. So it's like, okay, you can buy specialized wired Lightning headphones to try and get the best quality that you can. Never mind the whole you can't charge and play at the same time without special adapters or docks or whatever. But then you can only use those devices on, those headphones on iPhones and iPads. Unless Apple starts putting Lightning ports on its Macs, which is kind of weird. Now, Intel has come out and said, well, USB-C is the future of audio. And, it's kind of the same argument about analog versus digital. I'm at least a little bit more siding with Intel in that USB-C is an industry standard, right? You can have more than one manufacturer use it. You don't have the crazy licensing. You've got to pay Apple to use to license Lightning, and it'll only work with Apple products, kind of a deal. At least USB-C can have somewhat of a standard, be ubiquitous across devices. But it's kind of clear that Apple doesn't really want to adopt USB-C on its mobile devices. So overall, the whole thing is just really frustrating. I'm not pissed at Apple, simply because we knew this was going to happen, and Apple has done this kind of stuff before. But it's frustrating, and it's anti-consumer, and sometimes it's perfectly okay to leave well enough alone. This really screams of one of those kind of let's just make a change for change's sake type of decisions, instead of there's a real obvious clear benefit path going forward. By making this change, we are getting rid of technology that is legitimately antiquated. I don't buy it. I think they're doing it to sell more Beats, or to try to placate to Johnny Ive's desire to make phones even thinner, which I don't know why. I don't know what's behind that. But it's frustrating. It's not going to keep me from buying Apple products. I don't have an immediate plan to buy an iPhone 7, mostly because there's nothing wrong with my iPhone 6. The other changes in the 7 really aren't big enough to make me want to upgrade. But, it ultimately doesn't matter how much people whine and complain or whatever about it. Apple is a big enough company, it can throw its weight around and basically get people to do whatever it wants. At this stage, it would take Apple a major screw up. They would have to do something just colossally dumb to get people to look at them and go, nah, screw you. To get people to be like, I'm done. I'm going to switch to something else. They're not going to do that. Their products, for everything else that the products do, the products just work too good. It's a combination of they work good, like really good, and they are still somewhat fashionable. And what, the fashionable thing is kind of up for debate. Has Apple being fashionable kind of waned? Maybe a little bit, but it ultimately comes down to the product experience. And I do believe, and I think even the diehard Apple haters will agree, that at least Apple generally puts out a quality product. Whether they agree with the way that product is designed or works doesn't really matter. At least a lot of people, most people I think, would agree the products themselves are high quality. And I think that's why they sell so well. And that's why they're going to get away with this. That's simply what it is. But it is unfortunate that It's leaving a lot of people out. It is causing frustration and causing inconvenience. You know, Apple says, well, you know, we're making things easier by, you know, you'll just do wireless. You know, wireless is the future of headphones, and they're even coming out with their own little mini earbuds called the AirPods, which are wireless, and that's kind of another discussion. In a nutshell, I think they're overpriced and are going to underperform, but we'll see when the reviews come out, I guess. But, you know, unless you've got an entirely Bluetooth ecosystem around you where everything you own that could ever play audio supports Bluetooth, it's just an inconvenience. The big thing I see is cars. Yeah, a lot of cars in the last few years have had Bluetooth built in. My car is a 2013. It doesn't have Bluetooth built in. I've got an analog aux input, but in order to get Bluetooth, I got to rip the factory stereo out and put an aftermarket one in. But with the level of integration that cars have these days, I'm going to end up losing stuff like the steering wheel controls. I've been down this road before in previous vehicles where I've taken out the factory stereo, put an aftermarket one in. After seeing how poorly it integrated and all the crap that I had to do to get it to work, I ended up putting the factory stereo back in. So, you know, what am I supposed to do? Buy a new car because I want to listen to music off of my phone? Or do I have to go down that road of this crazy assortment of adapters and cables and wires to get what used to be a really simple solution to work? I think that's really kind of the crux of the frustration. And like I said, you know what? We'll eventually get over it. In 10 years from now, it won't be a big deal. 10 years from now, pretty much everyone's going to have a car that's got Bluetooth built in. Pretty much everyone's going to have Bluetooth headphones or, you know, Bluetooth portable speakers or a home stereo with Bluetooth or whatever. It ultimately won't be a big deal. But I do think that at that time, we'll look back and go, you know, yeah, I'm over it now, but it didn't really gain me a whole ton anyway. You know, my life's a little bit better, but not a whole lot. Probably not worth the pain that we're going to have to go through in the next couple of years to get past that. Now, there is one little thing that I do want to add to the end of this, and that is if Apple's trying to get past the analog audio port, claiming it's a unitasker, you know, it only works for a single purpose. It makes it harder to waterproof the phone. It takes up space in the phone. I'm just going to say this, Apple, you need to put your money where your mouth is. Because you know what else is a thing that's getting kind of old and takes up space in the phone? Any sort of physical connector, right? Like the Lightning port. We've got the capability for the phone to sync wirelessly, and technology exists to charge phones wirelessly. So why is the Lightning port still on the iPhone? We'll have to see about that one. So, as always, I'm interested in your thoughts. I have a feeling I know where most of the comments are going to go with this one, but hey, maybe I'll be surprised. So leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Also, I'm always interested in hearing thoughts for future episodes. I may not get to it right away, but they all go on a list, and I check out that list every time I'm going to go film a new episode. So leave your thoughts for new episode topics down in the comments as well. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me out quite a bit. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ThisDoesNotComp. And as always, thanks for watching.